What if the very foundation of you could just crack? We're about to dive into a deep, scientific mystery that calls the whole architecture of our identity into question, revealing what happens when that solid feeling of I begins to shatter.
So let's start with a really big question. What is it that makes you, you? Is it your memories, your body? Or is it that automatic, seamless feeling that you're the one in the driver's seat of your own life? It's something we all just completely take for granted. But what if that feeling could just break?
For well over a century, scientists have been wrestling with this profound medical puzzle, a condition that seems to literally fracture the experience of being a human being.
And that puzzle is called schizophrenia. For the longest time, researchers were just completely stumped. They could see all of its effects, but they couldn't nail down a root cause. And the reason why is that the picture it presented was just incredibly confusing.
I mean, just look at this list. On one hand, you have what they call positive symptoms, things like hallucinations and delusions, basically an excess of experience. But then on the other hand, you have negative symptoms, like apathy and social withdrawal, a complete lack of experience. These things seem to have absolutely nothing in common. It's a total jumble.
So this became the huge scientific question. Is there one single underlying problem that could possibly explain all of these wildly different symptoms? Is there a common thread? For decades, the answer was a shrug, nothing. Until, finally, a group of researchers decided to just completely change how they were looking at the problem. They decided to try a totally different kind of experiment, one that required a pretty radical shift in perspective.
Instead of just standing on the outside with a clipboard, observing patients and jotting down their behaviors, these scientists decided to focus on the one thing that had been almost totally ignored, the subjective, first-person experience. They actually started to listen systematically to what it felt like to be inside that mind. Now, this approach has a name. It's called phenomenology. It's the scientific study of lived experience. The goal isn't just to describe what someone does, but to truly understand the very structure of their consciousness from their own point of view. And what they started to hear was absolutely stunning.
Listen to this direct quote from a patient. "I was simply there, only in that place, but without being present." Think about that sentence for a second. It captures this deep, deep paradox. This isn't pointing to a problem with a specific thought or an emotion. It's pointing to a disturbance in the very feeling of existing, of being present in your own life. And this right here, this was the crucial clue.
By listening to these first-hand accounts, researchers finally found it. They found the common thread. And it was so much deeper and more fundamental than anyone had ever imagined.
The core problem wasn't some bad chemical or a single broken brain circuit that was only responsible for one symptom. No, it was a crack in the most basic experience of selfhood, a fundamental disturbance that then rippled outwards, creating all of those other more visible symptoms.
Okay, to really get this, we need one key term, ipsity. It comes from the Latin word ipse, for self. Ipsity is that automatic background feeling that your thoughts, your body is your body, that your experiences are yours. It's the invisible glue holding your entire reality together. You don't even think about it, it's just there. And in schizophrenia, this very glue starts to come undone.
And this is where the discovery gets really fascinating. This breakdown of ipsity isn't just a single problem, it's a two-sided problem. It's a paradox where two things that seem like total opposites start happening at the exact same time.
So on one side, you've got hyperreflexivity. This is like a really intense, distorted kind of self-awareness. Imagine your own thoughts, which are normally just you thinking, suddenly feel like these weird, alien objects floating in your mind that you are forced to just stand back and observe. This creates this profound sense of alienation from your own inner world.
And the other side of that coin is called diminished self-affection. This is the fading of that basic feeling of being a vital, living presence at the center of your own experience. That patient who said he was there, but without being present, he was describing this perfectly. It's the feeling of becoming a ghost in your own life.
And this insight is what finally cracked the code on those so-called negative symptoms. What looks like apathy from the outside isn't an empty mind at all. In fact, it can be the result of an unbelievably exhausting internal state of hyper-awareness. The person isn't empty. They are completely overwhelmed by the intense mental effort of having to observe their own mind, which has now become foreign to them.
So you've got these two forces, hyperreflexivity and diminished self-affection. And they aren't separate problems. They are two faces of the exact same crack in the self.
See, the more you're forced to observe yourself like an object, the less you feel like a living subject. They feed each other, creating this downward spiral of strange and confusing experiences.
Now, this is so much more than just a discovery about a complex illness. The implications go way deeper, because understanding this fracture, it holds up a mirror to the nature of our own normal reality.
Here's an analogy that might help. Think of your basic sense of self, your ipsity, as your mind's operating system. For most of us, it just runs so smoothly and silently in the background that we don't even notice it's there. It just works, you know? It lets all the other programs, your thoughts, your perceptions, your actions, run flawlessly.
Now imagine if that operating system suddenly crashed and just appeared on your screen as lines and lines of raw code that you were forced to analyze. Everything else would just grind to a halt. You couldn't run any of your normal programs. Well, that is what hyperreflexivity can feel like. The self process that's supposed to be in the background is now this object in the foreground, and the whole system just feels alien and broken. So here's the really mind-bending point. Studying this condition reveals that the solid, stable I that we feel at the center of our lives is not a given. It's not some indestructible core we're born with. It is an incredibly complex and fragile achievement of our brain, a constant, silent background process that is literally holding our world together.
Which brings us to the final and maybe the most important takeaway from this whole scientific journey.
You see, studying the fragility of the self does a lot more than just explain a set of symptoms. It forces us to appreciate the absolute miracle of our own ordinary consciousness. It shows us that the feeling of being a whole, unified self is a delicate balancing act, one that our minds are working tirelessly to maintain every single moment of every single day.
And that leaves us with one last thought-provoking question to just sit with. We all walk around every day with this absolute certainty of being an I, but this research shows us that this foundation isn't made of stone. It's being actively and carefully constructed moment by moment. And that just makes you wonder, just how solid is the foundation of I that you're standing on right now?